claims and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth from the dead and the immediate experience of personal fellowship with God? Well, I think the answer is obviously not. So to carry his argument, Dr. Slezak has to prove that it is highly probable that if God exists, we should have more evidence of his existence than what we do in fact have. And that, I think, is sheer speculation. And thus, in the case of God, I do not think that the absence of evidence is at all a positive argument against the existence of God, and yet that's all he's had to offer you tonight on behalf of atheism. So I don't think we've seen any good reason to think that atheism is true. Now, what about that second question? What is the evidence that God does exist? Here I offered 5 lines of evidence. First, the origin of the universe. Notice that Dr. Slezak responds to this argument by agreeing with that crucial second premise that the universe began to exist. In order to deny the conclusion, therefore, he is forced to deny the first premise, that whatever begins to exist has a cause, and he turns his guns upon it. Now, by a cause, I mean something that produces or brings into being its effect. And my argument is that whatever begins to exist must have a cause in that sense. Now, notice that Dr. Slezak does not refute this causal principle. He gives no reason at all to deny that this premise is true or to think that it is false. He merely asks the question, what reason is there to think that it is true? Well, let me give 2 reasons on behalf of the causal premise. Number 1, I think it is an obvious first principle of metaphysics. Being does not come from non-being. Something does not come from nothing. Atheists themselves recognize this truth. For example, David Hume, who is something of a hero to Professor Slezak, wrote to John Stewart, "I never asserted so absurd a proposition as that anything might arise without a cause. I only maintained that our certainty of the falsehood of that proposition proceeded neither from intuition nor demonstration, but from another source." The atheist philosopher Kai Nielsen gives the following illustration. He says, suppose you suddenly hear a loud bang, and you ask me, what made that bang? And I reply, nothing. It just happened. He says, you wouldn't accept that. In fact, you would find my reply quite unintelligible. Indeed, it really is unintelligible how being could come from absolute non-being. Just think about it. In the case of the universe, prior to the Big Bang, there wasn't even the potentiality of the existence of the universe. But then how could the universe become actual if there wasn't even the potentiality of its being? Or think again, suppose that something could come into existence from nothing. If that were the case, then it's inexplicable why just anything and everything doesn't pop into being out of nothing. But no one here tonight is worried that while you're listening to this debate, a horse may have popped into being uncaused out of nothing in your living room and is there defiling the carpet right now as we speak. As Dr. Slezak himself has written in another context, only academics could be so ridiculous. If made seriously outside the seminar room, such claims would be evidence of clinical derangement. In fact, the suggestion that the universe popped into being uncaused out of nothing is worse than magic when you think about it. At least in the case of magic, when the magician pulls a rabbit out of the hat, at least you've got the magician and the hat. But in the case of atheism, the universe or the rabbit just pops into being out of absolutely nothing. And I submit to you that's just metaphysically crazy. So that's the first reason, I think, on behalf of the causal premise. Secondly, the causal premise is a universally verified and never falsified principle of empirical science. This should be the highest form of proof to Dr. Slezak as an empiricist. And notice you cannot dismiss the causal principle like a taxi cab when you get to the origin of the universe. The only reason that anyone would deny it in that context is out of a desire to avoid the theism that it implies. But that is simply question begging in favor of atheism. So in short, I think that the first premise is impeccable, that we have good reason to believe that whatever begins to exist has a cause. But Dr. Slezak insists the Big Bang, he says, cannot have a cause because there was nothing before it. And here he quotes Quentin Smith on this head. Unfortunately, he misquotes Smith, who is the collaborator with me in our book, Theism, Atheism, and Big Bang Cosmology. What Quentin actually says in the book on page 120 is that the initial singularity cannot be the result of a prior natural process. But he says this still leaves open the question of whether the singularity, or the Big Bang, is an effect of a supernatural cause. He notes that such a supernatural explanation does not violate the singularity theorems because it does not try to extend the space-time manifold beyond the singularity. Now, Dr. Slezak says, well, the Big Bang can't have a cause because there was no time before the Big Bang. But notice the hidden assumption here. He assumes that causes must always precede their effects in time, but that's patently false. Causes can be simultaneous with their effects in time. And I would say in the case of God's creating the universe, God's creating the universe is simultaneous with the universe coming into being. Thus, even though there is no time before the Big Bang, God can create the universe by creating it at the moment of the Big Bang. Now, what about that second argument based on the complex order of the universe? I argued that the fine-tuning of the universe is due neither to law nor chance, and therefore it's plausibly due to design. Now, Dr. Slezak responds by saying, but any universe is equally improbable, and therefore there's nothing to be explained. This is just a misunderstanding of the argument. We're not talking here about the probability of our universe existing. Rather, we're talking about the specified probability of the universe's being life-permitting. As William Dembski explains in his book, The Design Inference, published by Cambridge University Press, the way we detect intelligent design in every area of life is by the combination of high improbability with an independently given pattern. Take that bridge hand, for example. Any combination of cards is equally improbable, that's true. But if somebody deals himself a perfect bridge hand whenever he deals the deck, it is the combination of high improbability plus that independently given pattern of what a winning bridge hand is that tips you off that this is due to design, not chance. So when Dr. Slezak says, so what if this person deals himself a perfect bridge hand? Well, I would just simply say that there are probably any number of folks here tonight who'd like to take you up for a few hands of cards after the debate, if he really can't detect the difference between design and mere chance. Now, in the case of the universe, it's the combination of the pattern of variables necessary for intelligent life plus the incomprehensible improbability that these variables all occur by chance that tips us off to design. Dr. Slezak says, however, but if the universe were not life-permitting, then we wouldn't be here to be surprised about it. But as the atheist philosopher J.L. Mackie explains, and I quote, this is not a good reply. There is only one actual universe, and it is therefore surprising that the elements of this unique setup are just right for life when they might easily have been wrong. This is not made less surprising by the fact that if it had not been so, no one would have been here to be surprised. So I think we've got good reason for believing the fine-tuning of the universe, which is necessary even for evolution to occur, points to intelligent design as the cause of the universe. Dr. Slezak did not respond to my arguments on the basis of objective moral values or the historicity of the resurrection of Jesus or the immediate experience of God. All of these, I think, present a powerful cumulative case for the fact that the Christian God exists, a case which I believe is more plausible than any case that can be mounted on behalf of an atheistic worldview.
Thank you. Well, let me take up what I said I'd do, and as Dr. Craig challenged me